All right, our next guest is not shy about his opinions and his hot sports takes. He's one of the best out there, Chad Withrow, host of Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow, 3 to 6 Eastern on Outkick.com. Chad, what's up, buddy?
Hey, David, always good to hang out with you, man. Looking forward to talking a little SEC today.
Hey, so we were talking before the interview started. I just kind of want to go down that trek. We're going to get into several other scenarios in the SEC, but just for right now, this A&M season, I never thought this was a 10-win team. I thought they were probably 8-4, 9-3. Technically, they're still in the running for that. But the way they find ways to lose games is what really is so frustrating. That's 2 seasons in a row. Last year they won 5, a lot of one-possession games. They're doing it again this year. Just what do you take away from what you've seen against really good talent, really good teams, I should say, but still ending up short?
Yeah, it's really frustrating because coming into the season, I'm kind of like you. I thought, 10 wins was really on the outside for A&M, but I did think this is a team that, with their talent, could play spoiler to a number of teams across the conference. And it just feels like with A&M, every time you get to a point where it feels like you know something about them, that you can say, okay, this is what they are, that changes the next week. There was a time where you thought, man, this front seven's really good. They're great against the run. They can get after the quarterback. That's what they are. And then that holds true for 2 or 3 weeks, and then maybe that falls apart a little bit. Then you think, okay, maybe you got something with the running game, and then that's an issue. Special teams have been inconsistent at times. So I think overall just the inconsistency has been the most troubling part of it. And look, it's getting over the hump. I mean, the great teams win close games. Bad teams can lose a bunch of close games. Mediocre teams can lose a bunch of close games. But what separates the mediocre from the good and the good from the great is the ability to win a one-score game. And that's something that A&M just has not been able to do the last couple of years under Jimbo Fisher. And I don't know what the answers are. I think there's a ton of questions and a ton of unanswered questions about this team and this program under Jimbo, but that's really the frustrating part for Aggie fans.
Maybe your answer is about to be Jimbo here, but considering the contract, I don't know. I really do not know. Who's got the hottest of seats in the SEC right now?
Well, I think there's 2 names at the top. It's Jimbo and it's Sam Pittman at Arkansas. I think the shine is off the apple for Sam Pittman at Arkansas also, although they just got a big road win in overtime against Florida this past week, so that's a nice bounce back for them. I think that the heat could turn up on Shane Beamer if things don't turn around here. And I'm not saying for this year, but I think his seat could be pretty warm next year if this is a team with Spencer Rattler that's well below 500 by the end of the year, which looks like it may end up being the case. With Jimbo Fisher, I mean, you guys know better than I on this. It's what is the financial risk in terms of what A&M people are willing to spend. We know they're willing to spend a lot with NIL. We know they're willing to spend a lot on hiring a coach. So I would reason to believe that if they think that Jimbo is not leading this program down the right path, that they're going to be willing to spend that buyout money to go find someone else also. So I'd put him on the hot seat as well. I still think odds are that he's back. If I had to name one coach that's not returning, I think it's Sam Pittman, and then I'd probably go Jimbo Fisher next. But I think it's a solid chance. Both programs are looking for new coaches this offseason.
You can make the argument, and by the way, I don't think it's a strong argument, but you can be like, look how close we were. If Connor Wigman is healthy and we'll get him back next year, 3rd year, like you can make that argument. The part that I struggle with it is, yeah, you can, but you've gotten 5 quarterbacks hurt over the last couple of years, right? Like people continuously get injured. So, and are you going to be able to keep anybody? And that's the big question in today's college football for any program, USC included out there on the West Coast.
It's really tough, because guys are going to have options every year. It's so hard to project also in college football what any team's going to be next year. I know it's fun for fans to sit back, like you said, Aggie fans may say, hey, we got this, and this coming back. Schedule looks like this. Okay, that's fine, but you can't take anything for granted. So you're going to look up at the next year and start to guess what your team and roster is going to look like, but we have no clue. I mean, deep down, I don't know if you get in this practice also, David. I don't look at the class of guys. I don't look what year they're in the program because it's so fluid.
Yeah.
I don't think, oh, well, this guy's going to be here 3 or 4 years and he's going to be a really good player by the end of it. It's really a year-to-year proposition across college football. And if you're not one of the hot teams, you're constantly trying to steal some juice one way or the other in recruiting, and that's tough to do. when you're not one of the top 10 or 15 programs in America. And then the whole strategy about how you're going to go about it. What's your percentage going to be? High school recruiting versus transfer portal. How are you going to manage that? We've seen Ole Miss have success by going heavy transfer portal, but now reports are that maybe Lane Kiffin wants to dabble a little bit more with high school players. How are you going to approach JUCO? Questions for every coach out there in roster management and maintenance. And I think that's tough. It bit Shane Beamer this offseason at South Carolina with some high-profile guys leaving that program. So we're going to see more of them. The key is to have a good functional NIL program to be able to retain the guys you really want to keep and not lose too many of them, and then be able to lure, I think, a few of the top transfers that you need at certain positions. To me, that's the formula to mix in with, let's face it, top 10, top 15 recruiting classes out of high school. That's the only way that, with really good coaching, that's the only way you're going to be relevant in the SEC moving forward. And I think coaches and programs know that.
Chad, look, I'd be a failure as a head coach, but I think in this current world of college football, if I were a head coach, I'd be looking for proven, experienced players more than young players. And I know that sounds counterproductive of what you're supposed to do, but I've just seen, and maybe I'm using A&M as this litmus test that I shouldn't, but like experience matters in today's college football with so many young players playing.
Especially on the offensive and defensive line. It matters a lot. I think with the offensive line, that is the one spot that I look at and say, you've got to keep guys together for 4 or 5 years, right? It's not, you can plug and play, the occasional, John Campbell at Tennessee is a good example at left tackle. Transfers in from Miami as a veteran guy, and he's been great. They plug and play him there, and he's been fine all season. But it's got to be one guy. You really need to develop those positions within your program under your coaching and get guys some reps together to really have a dominant unit on either the offensive or defensive line. So I think that's key at those positions. But I'm with you. I think, the hard part, though, David, is bring in all the young talent, not play that talent a ton, and then convince that talent after the year that your program is where you need to be because you're being developed. And even when guys don't get a chance to see it a lot on the field because they're just playing special teams or whatever it may be, you then have to get into the sales business of pitching them again, re-recruiting them and saying, we believe in your ability. Here's what our roster looks like. Here's where you're going to have an opportunity at safety or at slot receiver or wherever it is next year. We really need you to be a part of this. And then probably NIL is going to be involved too, because you know that NIL is going to be coming for them on the other end of the transfer portal. So it's really tough to manage. Look, I look at college football right now, and while I love it, it's my favorite sport. I think the quality of the game is at a really high level. If I am a coach and I have a chance to go to the NFL and only deal with football and only deal with coaching my guys and have someone else handle everything else, I am jumping at that opportunity to get out of college football. So I think we're going to see a little bit more and more of that, of really good college coaches, if given the opportunity, are going to want to get to the NFL game.
Chad, I want to talk Ole Miss for a minute. They got a huge game with Georgia this weekend. And I look at what Ole Miss has been able to do 2 out of the last 3 years. They're living the life that A&M expected to be living with Jimbo Fisher. They expected to be, because they're probably going to be a 10-win team again, right? What kind of chance do you give them against Georgia this weekend, considering Georgia hasn't lost in forever? And Ole Miss, they don't seem that good, but they find ways to win games.
I don't think Ole Miss has a chance on the road. They're a different team away from Oxford, I think, than they are at home. So I give them a slim chance of winning this game. But it is incredible what Lane Kiffin's able to do. They're never overly relevant to start a season, but they just kind of hang around. There's a one-loss team that we haven't spent a ton of time talking about all year. Then I look up and I see, hey, it's only a 3-point spread at home. What's going on there with that spread? And then they eke out a win over A&M to stay once beaten on the season. And they just kind of hang around. It feels like they do that almost every year, even with not a ton of buzz going into the season. So Lane Kiffin's done a great job. We know he's a good offensive coach. He's learned along the way about how to become a more responsible and better head coach. And I think we've seen that over his time at Ole Miss. He still likes to rib people. He still likes to have fun during the games. I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but that's who he is. He's never going to change that. And because of that, I think it's kind of led to the identity and personality of that Ole Miss program. I don't give them a great shot at winning this week. I actually think Missouri is probably a little bit better than Ole Miss. And Missouri hung tough with Georgia in that game. It's a 3-point game, I think, third or fourth quarter before Georgia pulled away. I think that's probably a 2-touchdown spread, and Georgia kind of keeps Ole Miss at arm's length most of the day.
Chad, how about LSU? When it's all said and done, how are we going to look at them these first couple of years? Because obviously year one was fantastic. A little bits of blips on the radar towards the end. This year, had A&M taken care of business, they would have had the same conference record as LSU. But A&M loses, LSU loses one. Do you think? How do you think they will be perceived at the end of this year?
Well, my question for them, first off, who's going to replace Jaden Daniels? Right, that's going to be a big question mark. Offensively, they have no real questions. They've been great on offense all year. They got to find a defense, and there's no excuse not to have a really good defense at LSU. We've seen it since Nick Saban came to the SEC the first time at LSU. They've hung their hat with some dynamic defensive players that have gone on to have really good NFL careers. So Brian Kelly's got to figure that part out. I think if they figure out the defense, they're going to be right there at the top of I know we're going away from divisions, but they're going to be right there with the Alabamas, the Georgias, everyone else. They're not that far off right now. I just think defense is the big separation. Alabama's got a defense. Georgia's got a defense. That's who they're going to measure up to all the time. And right now, LSU just lacks in that department. Offense is great. It was number one in America coming into that Alabama game as a scoring offense, but they got to figure things out defensively. If they do that, they're recruiting well. You can live and be a very good team just recruiting the state of Louisiana and locking down that state for LSU. So if they continue to do that, I think they're going to be a really good program, only getting better. So I would be encouraged if I'm an LSU fan, but I don't know that I'm thrilled because you know what you're getting with Brian Kelly. You're going and hiring a mercenary head coach, much like the Jimbo Fisher hired A&M, right? You're hiring a guy that has been there, that's competed for national championships at a big program. You're luring that person away from a big program to come in and help you win a national championship. There's no other way around it. That is the goal when they hired Brian Kelly.
Chad, great stuff, man. Thanks so much for making time. We'll do it again.
Hey, always fun. Thanks for having me on the show.